Welcome everybody to Gleam, and my name is Richard Leonard, a director of Hayball, and I'm your MC for today's session. And I should really start by explaining what the acronym Gleam is. Gleam is galleries, learning environments, and museums, and it's a little session that Hayball started a couple of years ago to promote discussion on these important and rapidly evolving areas. And we did so by running regular sessions, all in the Sydney studio, usually monthly, and with invited speakers and specialists presenting in our studio there. But with COVID, a rather wonderful change has been forced upon us, and that is obviously to go online. And what this has enabled us to embrace is obviously a far wider audience and to gain access to even more speakers beyond the boundaries of our own office. And so today we welcome you all from many parts of Australia, from New Zealand, from Malaysia, from South Africa, from the United Kingdom, from Sweden and Italy. And please, if I've missed anybody from exotic parts of the world, please let us know in the chat box. So to formally welcome you all, it's even more important in these tumultuous times to do so with a welcome to country. And for that, I'm delighted to have one of our younger Hayball team to drive this acknowledgement. So Mika, can I say welcome to you, and the screen is all yours.
Thanks, Rick. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which we all meet. For me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like you to remember that the land we thrive in was once theirs and it always will be.
Thank you, Mika. And a little story, Mika has prepared some of those words herself because she realised that so many people were in fact beyond where you are in the nation of the Gadigal people. So thanks again, Mika. In the next hour, we will hear three wonderful speakers with very different perspectives on the subject of progressive pedagogies, new learning, new spaces, new lens. We've got Bill Conway, retired principal at the Montessori East Primary School and Preschool in Sydney. Stephanie McConnell, the principal at Lindfield Learning Village. And finally, Lucy Allen, Associate Lecturer, Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation from the UTS, again in Sydney. And I'm really looking forward to hearing our speakers' views because these are the very things that keep me awake at night and get me up in the morning as an architect involved in education. And as architects, we know that contemporary education is, education design is really driven very much by pedagogy. No longer are we designing classrooms as the one shot in the locker approach to education, but we are now dealing with a far deeper appreciation of how students learn, the concept of multiple intelligences, and how teachers encourage, engage, and enlighten students for a world that we can't even fully imagine. So, somewhat optimistically, we're going to cover the full spectrum of education from pre-primary to primary, secondary, and tertiary. And we'll do so in that order. And each speaker, just so you know, will have around about 12 minutes, and we'll endeavour to hold a Q&A session at the very end. And in the meantime, there is a little tab at the bottom, or you've got two tabs. There's a Q&A tab that you're more than welcome to fire off questions as we run. And please, everybody feel free to get active on the little chat button on the bottom middle of the screen. So, to lead the discussion, our first speaker is Bill Conway. And a little bit about Bill. Bill has been a professional in the field of education for almost 40 years. His career path within education has included roles in teaching, counselling and administration within schools in the US, in Colombia, New Zealand and Australia. He became interested in school reform early in his career, working on programs which particularly enhanced children's self-awareness and personal development. And after 13 years serving as principal in various schools around the world, he decided to move back and go to the Montessori East School in Bondi in 2007. Since then, he has also co-developed and presents an internationally certified Montessori school leaders course and assisted projects locally and internationally. Bill has recently retired, lucky you, Bill, and is running many projects, including Montessori East Future Proof Project. A little personal note, Bill has 4 children spread around the globe and recently became a grandfather. So congratulations, Granddad, and over to you.
Unmuting myself. Thank you, Richard, and it's really wonderful to be here. I feel really honored to be on a panel with Stephanie and Lucy. Especially, I'm such a fan of the Lindfield Learning Village, and it's just so wonderful to have public education, the Department of Education embracing something that's a bit more out there, and even something quite similar to, in many ways, to Montessori, as you'll hear. So when I thought about sharing Montessori as a progressive pedagogy or a new pedagogy, I realized that actually I was going to be talking about something that's more than 100 years old. So it's not very new, but I do feel it is quite relevant. But I'm sure that I'm on this panel because we see the relevance of Montessori in today's education climate. Montessori developed this approach to teaching and learning not from a science lab or university research. She actually was a scientist trained in medicine, but her beginnings involved working with intellectually challenged children. And then her first school was actually in the slums of Rome, in a housing project where the landlords wanted someone to take care of some rowdy children that were running around destroying the property. So, these are beginnings that also made her study the child. So the one thing that came out of Montessori's work that really makes her pedagogy so relevant for today is that she understood the young learner within a changing world. Now that's what really has grabbed me, and that's where I'm going to start off with, because Montessori was obsessively child-centric. She was also very global in the way that she looked at things, and she studied sociology and anthropology. So she had this kind of macro view of the world we live in, but also she was an observer of the child in such an amazing way. She saw that the child was a natural learner, that the child learns when freedom to choose is a constant in the classroom. She saw that the child learns best when learning involves the hands and the senses, and when challenge is appropriate and where the learning makes sense to the child. The learner has potential that goes well beyond adult expectations, and we see that a lot especially when we have parents coming into our toddler program, and often we have them there to observe their own child, and they really want to kind of get engaged with what's happening, help them to carry that glass of water or help them pour something. And the first thing we have to do is really to step back, have the adult step back and see that the potential is amazing. The children are so much more capable than we sometimes give them credit for. She also saw that learning happens everywhere. It's not just something that's confined to a classroom, which is something that I think in the last few months, a lot of people have realized that when schools have been closed, that the children continue to learn. And learning is best captured at appropriate times and comes from the child's own interest. And as I said before, Montessori was a scientist. She was a physician by training, and she worked first with the children with intellectual disabilities. And it sparked a lot of interest worldwide when they saw what she could do just by simply connecting them with interest and with materials that were specially designed. So Montessori recognized that the child not only as a learner, but also as a hope for humanity. So she saw this macro part of things also. She saw that they are fundamental in, and they are the hope for humanity in establishing peace in the world. And if we get it right at this level, we can change the world. Now, I'd like to talk now about the prepared adult and the prepared environment. I'm using those terms because those are the terms that Maria Montessori used. And she mentions about the prepared adult because it could be the teacher, it could be the parent, it could be anyone who's working with a child. So the word that we like to use instead of teacher is guide, because it is different. And we first have to look at the fundamental shift that needs to happen with the more traditional definition of teacher. So the adult guides learning. The adult is not the source of knowledge. The adult invites the child to lessons and promotes self-driven learning. The adult also provides the environment with liberty, freedom to move and discover. The child learns about themselves, and they learn especially what they love and what they don't love by having this freedom. The adult makes sure that learning is attractive and relevant. So the teacher is trained in presenting and using specially designed materials, maintaining the learning environment to keep the individual and group needs. And our teachers and guides also must go through incredibly rigorous training, and talk to any Montessori teacher and they'll agree that they said that was the most difficult course they've ever taken. It's not designed, it's actually because so much is crammed into a short amount of time. I think it should have been a 4-year course. But it is, in this, they learn about the comprehensive curriculum and the methodology. During this course, they learn about the underlying principles of Montessori. They also have to unlearn a few things. They have to unlearn the classic strategies that teaching and learning takes in schools, something that they would have been brought up with themselves as students. And as I said, the training is not easy, and it's one of the most challenging parts of my job is to actually make sure that the teachers are given the opportunity to teach in a Montessori way, to make sure that the quality of education that we provide in the school is something that does hinge on the importance of the prepared adult. So learning in the school also hinges on that the prepared adult, and the important thing that the adult needs to work in and work with is not only the materials but also the prepared environment. And for you to really get an appreciation for that prepared environment, I'm going to share a few photos of Montessori classrooms and Montessori at work, so you get an appreciation how there might be some differences, especially some of you are architects and designers, so you can kind of see, it's not that we have necessarily an incredibly beautifully designed school architecturally, but you can kind of see that in the classrooms there's some things that are going on in there that do make learning spaces a bit different than what you might find in traditional schools. So I'm going to share my screen. And this first photo is just a photo of one of our, what we call Cycle 1 classes. And I wanted to show this because every learning environment that we have has to meet the needs. And also it needs to be attractive in the way it looks, and also it has to provide engagement, because those are the needs of the child, to be attracted to learning and to be engaged in learning. So the classroom and the physical environment is very important to achieve that. This is a classroom, Cycle 1, which is ages 3 to 6. And so this would be our preschool classes. This is our Cycle 2 classroom, which would be the equivalent of years 1, 2, and 3, ages 6 to 9. And again, as you can see, there are these are environments that have a lot of materials. You can see the difference between these classrooms in the way that learning takes place at tables more than in individual tables, but also floors are used. The beauty of the environment is really, really important. And you'll see in a lot of Montessori classrooms that this aspect of adding a little flower or vase, that the children actually themselves prepare and place on the table because they're engaged in taking care of their community. And it also, I see this as really dignifying learning and dignifying the importance of the child when you have this kind of beauty in your environment. Now, in Montessori East, we actually have an under threes program. So we actually start from birth, or actually pre-birth. And the parents come with their children into an environment, and this is where they learn about the importance of how children can engage with practical life rather than just toys. So there aren't really any toys in our environments, but there are materials. And the children enjoy them just as much as they would a toy, but they are purposeful in the way they're designed. And a lot of them are practical life. As you can see in this picture, this child is peeling a carrot. This is something that he may have seen his mother do, but it's things that really have a purpose, not just for diversion. This is again our 3 to 6 classroom. The learning spaces in which they learn are different than perhaps some of the other classrooms. They use a lot of floor mats, and those are rolled up in front of the teacher there. And the children will take that out of the container. They'll set the mat on the floor, and then they'll set the materials there. And that's their workspace. And they do also have tables, and they can go inside and outside. This is that cycle 2 classroom, the 6 to 9 year olds. And you can see that the tables are more in group configurations because children at this age learn through more of a social context, and they like to ask questions, they like to work with others. And so rather than trying to separate them off into individual areas, this is encouraged in the learning environments for the 6 to 9s. In the 9 to 12, which is our equivalent of year 4 through 6 in primary, a lot of times the lessons are taught by a teacher at the tables where the children are working. And as you can see in this picture, there's a lot more material that's around the classroom. You see it on the shelves, but children that are sitting on the floor as well as at tables. At this age, they're such vivacious social beings that you really you need to have them working together, but they also can work individually if they choose to. They can choose to work on the floor or on the tables. The aspect of the multi-age, so when you have 3 ages in one class, is that it's conducive to setting the environment up also as like a mini society. It's a place where the children are involved with taking care of their environment. They're involved with helping younger children that are in their classroom. The younger ones learning from the older ones. The older ones actually give lessons sometimes to the younger ones. So it's very much this interaction that's going on between the different age groups, which really provides a wonderful environment for them. It's not just a classroom, it's actually more like home. And this is a little corner in one of the classrooms where the children we're doing a bit of knitting, and you can see there's a lamp and there's a little sofa there. There's this aspect of the classroom being like the home. In fact, Montessori even referred to the classroom as the casa, which means house in Italian and Spanish. The children also do a variety of, they're not set to work at a particular time. Where they have to do a subject at a particular time, they're free to choose work, and they could work on mathematics, or they could work on geography, or they can work on anything. But I wanted to show this picture to show the beauty of the materials and the simplicity of the environment also. There's not a lot of clutter in the environment, and the materials are displayed on the shelf to be beautiful, to be something that's attractive to the child. And in the foreground, some of the materials, they're all kind of contained either in a basket or a tray or something that the child can easily access. And this would be something more that 3 and 4 year olds would be attracted to some of the practical life materials that could be pouring, or it could be sewing or sorting and things like that. as I said before, the child is very involved in taking care of their classroom. They will clean it. They'll be involved in wiping things down, washing tables. This boy is obviously cleaning the plant. So these are things also that engagement, that feeling of ownership of their environment is really important. The outdoor and nature is also incredibly important in Montessori, because so much of what the child sees in nature is to learn about the world. And they start as young children in preschool and taking care of plants. And then as they get older, they start to also see plants as part of our food. And they will, in our school, we actually grow vegetables, and we actually sell veggie boxes also to the community as part of the service that's extended to the wider community. So they raise money for an orphanage in Thailand, and they kind of see the whole process of how the world works by actually doing things and not just reading about it in a book. And food preparation is very much, because it's a fundamental need of ours, and children aren't just there to be recipients of food that's given to them. This is something that's important, that they're actually involved in the preparation of that food. And yes, they do use knives, and they're very careful, and we haven't ever had any fingers lost luckily in the process of children preparing food. But it is something where they see this meaning that's given to not only preparing food, but also eating when they're hungry rather than eating at a particular time when the bell rings. So that's it's all part of that, the child becoming aware of themselves, aware of what they like and what they don't like. And there's a link between the school and home, which is quite important. And we really see this wonderful importance of the school, children coming to school from home. And it's not that they wait when they come to school to learn what they're going to do that day. They actually are thinking at home, and they may even be talking to their parents about what they want to do when they get to school, because it's their choice. And it's amazing how they'll walk in and just absolutely be engaged from the get-go. So I just wanted to finish off about, because the topic of this is about new pedagogies, new learning, and this is a growing pedagogy. It is it is 100 years old. It's something that is being embraced around the world. And when the child can take charge of learning, it's easier for them to embrace change. And I think this is the kind of world we are living in, is a world that is rapidly changing. And education is trying to keep up with some of those changes, but I think it's not so much about keeping up with changes. It's really about having children prepared for change and having them understand that actually change is inevitable and part of life. And so I think that's where I see the pedagogy as being very appropriate to the kinds of needs that we have in society now. So I'm not sure if I've gone, how long I've gone. I should keep track of the time, but Richard, should I cut off now?
You've gone a little over time, Bill, but that was all wonderful. And to keep things rolling, we will have to move on to the next speakers. But thank you so much for bringing the pre-primary and primary perspective. And one of the really interesting things that resonated for me, Bill, was the concept of the prepared adult and the prepared environment. And I hold that up. Well, it's not going to come across screen, but there's a book just out now that I'm reading, Testing 321, What Australian Education Can Learn from Finland. And one of the comments they make in that, in terms of preparation, is the first 2 days of school, so the author is saying, is spent not with anything academic, just staff and students actually playing together and building relationships and getting to know students and preparing them for what is the rest of the year. So thanks again, Bill, and we'll move quickly to our next speaker, Stephanie McConnell with the Lindfield Learning Village. And just to introduce Stephanie, her 30 years as an educator has continually shaped her vision for the future of education in New South Wales. Her passion is to shift the default position of education from a 19th century model to one which not only meets but excels in meeting the needs of young people of today as they head out into the future, which requires them to be agile, flexible, and adaptable learners. Stephanie is currently implementing a range of exciting and innovative educational initiatives at the school. Her vision is to transform the education experience for students and shift the education system from the old ways. She sees education, innovation and collaboration as the keys to this change, and cites Lindfield as an extraordinary opportunity and privilege to lead a flagship school for the children and young people of New South Wales. And just before you cut in, Stephanie, I think one of the most exciting visits I had last year was to your school. And to give people a flavour, at the end of the day, I witnessed, I think it was the assistant, possibly the two assistant principals in the main gallery space by the front door, on a grand piano, and they were singing together, and I recall it was House of the Rising Sun. But it just showed a little bit of the spirit of the school. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Richard and Fiona and Hayball, for hosting this event. It's I must say, a really exciting privilege for me. And, you know, and thanks, Bill, for your amazing insight. And as you know, you and I keep running into each other in various forums, and what you've just spoken about really resonates so strongly with the vision that we have at Lindfield, and the ways that we love to operate and to work with young people. And I think that, you know, just following what Richard's just said, we all got around the grand piano, which was a relic from the building, which I'll talk about in a moment, while our students were working from home during the COVID season. And we rewrote the words to Richard Mark's song, Right Here Waiting For You. So we've recorded all of that, and we sent it out to our children. But that's by the by. I think just by way of context, Lindfield Learning Village, brand new school, opened day one, term one of last year, 2019. We are a K-12 school. We started last year by enrolling students in kindergarten through to year 10, and this year have taken our first group through to year 11, and obviously they will move into year 12 next year, where we will see the full complement across all of our age groups. And it was important to us to start the school that way, because one of the key pillars of our educational model is around that all through learning. And I know Bill referred to education beginning even in the womb. And, you know, we are influenced very strongly by the amazing Professor Stephen Heppel, who worked closely with Fiona, myself, and some other amazing minds to develop the educational model for Lindfield. And I remember Stephen talking about sperm to worm learning, and that's what we're all about. So beginning last year, we walked in the door with 315 students from kindy to year 10, a team of 40 staff, all of whom had never met each other before. I had almost 2 weeks with 3/4 of them to try and work out how we were going to start a school. I was handed the keys to the school and was able to take off my hard hat and high-vis vest at 5 p.m. on the professional learning, the school development day, the day before the kids walked in. So it has, we have certainly had a tumultuous birth. And through that 12 months, the enormous privilege of building everything from scratch, and quite deliberately thinking carefully about what we put on that blank slate. Blank slate in terms of the education that we were to offer, but not a blank slate in terms of the building that we were inhabiting. And I think it's just really interesting to have such a huge variety of sectors represented in the audience. So for the architects in the room, we occupy what was originally built in the late 1960s, to be the home of the William Bowman College Teachers College in Sydney, and then through its lifetime became eventually the University of Technology campus at Ku-ring-gai. So those of you who are in Sydney might be familiar with the site and perhaps even with the building. It's certainly something that people look at and remember either their time there as a student, or for me it was about attending my children's dance concerts in the amazing 880-seat auditorium. But it's a very familiar and important site, and also in terms of Mika's wonderful acknowledgement of country at the beginning, a site that has a really significant Aboriginal history that we also celebrate. I think what I might do is also share my screen and give you an opportunity just to absorb a graphic that I want to share. And as I speak through what our key pillars are, hopefully you will, and this is I guess our latest evolution of where we are at and how we want to, I guess, present ourselves to the world. But this is a constantly changing picture. What doesn't change is the vision, and that is absolutely crystal clear and at the centre of everything that we do. And you will see some of the words on that graphic there will resonate through the vision that we have. But there are a number of key pillars that we developed, as I said, with the team, with Fiona and Stephen Heppel at the time and others. The all through learning I've already mentioned. And the school itself, although it's currently 315 students, will by 2022 have capacity for 2,000. So although we won't be growing, and I certainly won't be enrolling that fast, we will have that capacity. And I've always got to think about what it might look like for us as a large school as we develop the integrity of our model over the coming years. So it's also designed to have what we call home bases, and that's essentially neighbourhoods within the larger school environment, or a school within schools model. And that's essentially and fundamentally around the well-being for our young people, to ensure that they are known, valued and cared for, and that they have that very important framework and structure where nobody falls through the cracks, I guess. Another really important pillar of our model is stage not age learning. Now, Bill's already talked to you about the Montessori model and the value of various age groups learning together, and we just embrace that opportunity in so many ways. So our student learning spaces are designed to accommodate that particular aspect of our model. So we would have, well, this year we have developed that even further. We have all of our kindergarten to year 2 students in one large learning space, and just since returning from COVID season have moved our 3 to 6s into a hub environment, but they were in 2 stage-based spaces. And then our 7s to 11s, 7s and 8s are in together as a stage 4, 9 and 10, and then 11 it changes slightly because the joyous HSC causes us more trouble than it's worth, but we are working on that and working on new ways around it. And so in year 11 it becomes a blended learning model. We are also a school that, for us, our horizon goal is around transdisciplinary learning, and we are working towards what that might look like in an environment where we in New South Wales have an extremely restrictive curriculum and really difficult requirements that we need to be meeting. But we do that, and we are a public comprehensive co-educational school. And it's just exciting to be able to look for the scope within that to do what we are able to do within that system. Design-centered learning is what we would talk about in the way that we design the experience for students, but it's all about the autonomy and the choice and the agency that those young people have in their learning experience on a daily basis. And flexible timetable is another thing that we are working on. So it's all about bending and breaking structures, but making them work in the best way possible to give choice and agency to students. And the last pillar is really about the community, university and business links. It's that connection to our wider community and global community, and accessing all of the learning and the value that brings to a child's learning experience. I think for us that, as you hopefully can see resonating in the image here, the well-being of the child is absolutely at our centre. And those words, the W words in the centre of the image there, that children are well, willing, winning and within their community. So the wellness aspect is all about their well-being, and we have what we call a learning guide for every student that fundamentally is their key trusted adult at the school, the key conduit between home and school, and the person who supports them both academically and personally. Willing is about engagement. It's about having those opportunities similar to what Bill talked about, where it's always about thinking differently about how we might engage students and give them choice in their learning experience. Winning is about a child being able to see and experience success, and we know that that's a really important part of moving forward in a learning journey. And the within is being part of culture, and culture is a critical piece for us. We work on a number of pedagogical modes, and they are something that keep evolving as we look for better ways of doing what we're doing. But we moved this year into what we call an IDU space across particularly our secondary environment, where you would not be, as a student, going from maths to science to English to history throughout the course of your day, but you might have 4 teachers in an open learning space teaching allowing you to engage in all of those subject areas at once. And that's been a fantastic experience for us. So our pedagogical modes include things like masterclasses and what we call pop-up lessons. So I think the next slide kind of gives you a bit of an idea of this is a really crude example of our educational model, because in terms of the graphic, we're still building this, and that's what we do. We go with minimum viable product. But it is all about developing that sort of, you can see that the W's are actually in the centre. I know it's really hard to see, but the learner is always at the centre, surrounded by active collaborative relationships. But then the next layer around that is what we call pedagogies of responsiveness, and that's where that pop-up lesson is about responding to the need that's occurring in front of you as the teacher, gathering students in to have that just-in-time learning experience. All of the hexagons that surround that are a way of building together. This is what we call the NEM, the new educational model that we are mandated, I guess, by the New South Wales Public Education, the Secretary Mark Scott, to develop and to share with the wider educational community. But the other aspect that then sits around those, and there's so much behind each of those hexagons, but the pedagogy of reciprocity, I think, is also something that we believe is really important. And that is that learning is not a one-way thing. It's not about a teacher delivering knowledge to a student. In fact, it's not at all about that. It's about a student teaching a teacher. It's about students teaching each other. It's about the community learning from and teaching all of us as a community of growth. And that all of that fundamentally is about that ongoing critical reflection on our growth. Just aware of time, so I'm just going to flick through that. I just wanted to bring up this slide because I know there was a question earlier on the question slides around ways of thinking around different disciplinaries. But for us, I quite deliberately don't just pick up and import a program or a model. I think it's really important for us as a learning team to develop and to bring the best of our learning globally and based on very strong educational research, and develop what we believe is the right combination. So there are our learning characteristics that are broken down, as you can see, around the outside. For the architects, I'll just give you a quick run through of what our spaces look like. Beautiful heritage listed building, which adds more joy to the challenge. And because it was designed to be a university, making these spaces appropriate for our littlest people has been no mean feat. So hence the orange balustrading, lovely brutalist architecture, and it is an absolutely amazing building. So you will see that's our fish tank. It doesn't look like that now. All those plants have grown up quite beautifully. But I think what I would also say about spaces is what we've learnt in the last 12 months about furniture. You can't really see it very well in this image, but anything that's bright and bold and, you know, in some of those primary colours, children they tend to see that as fun. So items like those ones there regularly get thrown around, rolled down the stairs, because why wouldn't you when you've got a fantastic staircase nearby? But what we have learned is actually we've built out our cafe to have more of that look that Bill's just showed you, where we have lounge chairs and it feels more like home, and you just notice how differently children behave in spaces where you don't have those bright, bold colours. A lot of the colour choices here are based on the fact that it's heritage listed and it's aligned with the brutalist period to have these key bold colours. So the red here in this space, the orange, which is a little bit in your face. Some of our beautiful children in the outdoor play area from kindergarten there right through to a year 10 student. My gorgeous auditorium, which I love. And then I guess the last thing that I just wanted to finish with is what the opportunity we found COVID gave us. And I've mentioned to you that two of our key pillars were around transdisciplinary learning and a flexible timetable. So we actually, after we got over the initial shock of COVID, we took a step back and said, we need to look at this as an opportunity. We need to hear that NESA and New South Wales, the Educational Standards Authority in New South Wales, have said that we don't need to be meeting outcomes this year. We don't need to be worrying too much about assessment. Reporting can look quite different. This is our gateway. This is our thin edge of the wedge. This is the way that we need to grasp hold of this opportunity and see what we can do with it. So we went straight out to, and we were hearing from our families the stress of trying to work from home with a child, trying to learn. So we took all of that stress out and we went with a program which is focusing on fun, flexibility and choice. So we designed, children designed their own day. We offered big quests which were designed to go for a week, baby quests which were smaller, so the child could take that wherever they wanted to. For those who still wanted to maintain some focus on subjects and electives, they could do that. Younger children who weren't yet able to choose electives at school could jump into electives. Beyond is our Beyond the Curriculum program, which is all about projects and down the rabbit hole projects, as well as change the world projects, entrepreneurial projects, so children could continue with their work on that. That's part of our normal program anyway. The Makerspace was, we just put together a whole lot of packages where kids could come in, or parents would come in and collect a package of equipment, and they could build and make things from home. And then our booster clubs are about students teaching students. And again, that's something that happens at school, but we opened up that opportunity for children to be able to do that from home as well. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you. And over to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. And I love the concept of masterclasses and pop-up classes. And again, going back to the site visit that I had last year, you invited us to just roll around the school and join classes, and it was just fantastic to see it in action. And to everybody involved in that project, congratulations. Our next speaker is actually a wonderful bookend to tonight's session, in that she's an ex-Montessori student. So we have Lucy Allen from the Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation at UTS, where she is an associate lecturer in and working in collaborative learning environments where students, industry and academics shape the future of education and work. As a transdisciplinary teacher, researcher and designer, Lucy believes in transformative education that moves beyond discipline. Creative thinker by nature, Lucy is a graduate from the pioneering cohort of the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, and co-founder of a startup in the chronic illness support sphere. With experience in innovation, practice and the creative arts, her work currently investigates embodied cognition, student experience and complex problem solving. Her most recent project sees her reimagining the future of education with secondary education students. So with that impressive bio, it's over to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much, Rich. I'll just share my screen. It's a real joy to be here with everyone tonight and have the opportunity to follow on from both Bill and Steph, who, to be honest, have laid out quite beautifully a lot of what I'm going to be sharing and talking about tonight. But I think this is a true reflection of Montessori. I'm a lover of visualizing things and putting things together in that way. So of course, that's how I'm going to do it. And that's how I'll share a bit about my story, as well as the different pedagogies and approaches that we're using in the tertiary space, and in particular, transdisciplinary education and innovation at UTS. So this is a really basic and brief visual of my education story. So as mentioned, I went to a Montessori primary school, and this was really the beginning of my love of learning and sense of agency as a learner and student moving through my life. I then went to a more traditional high school where the excitement of wearing a uniform, doing homework and doing assessments was all consuming. And I never quite did hate homework, believe it or not. And then I found myself at UTS, where I initially went to study just a single degree, but couldn't pass up the opportunity to study the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, which we'll call BCII for short, that is one of the first transdisciplinary degrees of its kind, where it brings together students from over 25 different disciplines and has us working in incredibly collaborative and unique ways, which I will dive into. And as mentioned, I then, after university, went out into the startup sphere. And for those of you that have been in it, know that you don't do more learning than you do when working on a startup and in the entrepreneurial space. So that was a very rapid learning curve, before coming back and landing where I'd left off, which was in the same faculty I'd studied in, so the Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation, where I've found this incredible space bringing together my passion and love for education, but also the incredibly diverse education experience I've had. And so when we're talking about great learning, new learning, ideal pedagogies, it's quite tempting to land and sit on a few or a couple, but as both Steph and Bill have talked to today, there is no one perfect pedagogy or approach. And so we like to use the term bricolage, the idea that we're bringing together and creating and recreating different approaches, that we never quite settle on one approach. We're always testing, retesting, and having a play in its essence. And that's what really underpins our faculty, as well as the types of degrees that we're running in this tertiary space. And so it is about bringing together all of these different perspectives, frameworks, methodologies, environments, particularly when you're at this tertiary level where students come from a range of lives, backgrounds, experiences, and educational standpoints as well. So what is FTDI? What do we do? What does our learning look like? To dive into that, I think it's important to explain a little bit about what transdisciplinarity is. And I'll use a beautiful little analogy that doesn't belong to me. We use this quite often, but I'm going to invite you all to a dinner party. So to my dinner party, I'd love you to bring along just one ingredient. So with you, you'll bring this ingredient, we'll sit down at the table, and we might first just sit and eat this one ingredient. I've bought an egg, so I'm going to just eat my egg. It has its own properties, its own flavour, its own contribution. That's a disciplinary perspective. I'm not really charging beyond what's in front of me on my plate. But let's say, for example, that Steph had brought along granulated sugar and she adds some of that to my plate. My egg and my granulated sugar are going to stay separate, but I'll eat them both. And this is what we call a multidisciplinary perspective, where we're bringing two disciplines together, but those boundaries are still intact. But what about if we mix it together? We're starting to get a little bit of a concoction here. We're integrating the different properties of these two separate ingredients and starting to create something new. We're starting to go beyond the boundaries that have been defined by these disciplines. So you can see what can sometimes be confusing, that difference between an interdisciplinary versus multidisciplinary approach. But what about when we get to transdisciplinarity? Well, imagine we're sitting around the table and I'm going to say, hey, everyone, let's bring all our ingredients together. We are going to co-create and collaborate to make something completely new and different to what we perhaps might have imagined. And we may create a pavlova because, hey, who doesn't love a pavlova? And so you can see that the complexity of these approaches and practices increase as you move through these different disciplinary perspectives and approaches. So we're really operating in this quite complex space of transdisciplinary learning, where we're trying to learn and teach in this space, but also learn and teach these individuals and groups of people to become transdisciplinary practitioners themselves. So at the core of what our transdisciplinary learning means, it means to engage and learn through these multiple perspectives, worldviews and paradigms. So as I mentioned, we bring together students from over 25 different disciplines. They're all studying their core degree at the same time. So they're all bringing their own perspectives and worldviews to the table when they come together in this transdisciplinary learning space. As Steph was talking about just before, the core of this is mutual learning. There is never learning that occurs where it is only the student learning. We operate from the perspective that the teacher is going to learn just as much as the student, and also adding in industry and partners into that mix. So we work incredibly collaboratively with all those three components on real world challenges. Because to be and become a transdisciplinary practitioner out in the real world, it's about developing a skill set and an attitude to be able to tackle and challenge some of our world's most complex issues in a really collaborative way. So when it comes to, I guess, particular pedagogies or approaches, we can throw around all sorts of names and titles, but at its core, it's about holistic learning. As both Bill and Steph have talked about, it's about putting the student, the individual, at the very center of everything that we do. There is not one piece of learning or learning experience that does not try to recognize in all of our capabilities the life, the experiences, the perspectives that each of our students bring. Not to say that there aren't challenges with that. Our cohorts have grown from a cohort of 80 to a cohort of 450. So we'll get back to you on how we manage that expansion, but it's very interesting. And then a really cool part of what we do is experiential learning. That has been a real through thread for my education. The idea of practice, of action, not just sitting and listening and trying to compute. And I love the analogy of learning to skip. We could sit here all together and discuss for days and hours the right velocity, the right speed, the right timing that it would take for us to do that perfect jump rope, or we could just pick the darn thing up and do it and practice it and fail and learn from those mistakes. But within that practicing and failing, we allow our students and us as teachers to actually form agency in action and agency in our learning. And I'd have to say, listening to both Steph and Bill, that is what's come through as this core thread, is student agency, and how do we foster that agency in our students so that when they leave our schools, institutions, they carry that through with them through life. And then the other aspect is, of course, play and experimentation. And that's not just for the students, it's for us as teachers and staff members as well. When I say bricolage, bringing things together, we never run the same subject as a repeat. Every single time a subject is run, we'll have a different industry partner who poses a different world challenge. We'll have a different cohort of students who have all of their own different perspectives and lives. We'll have a different teaching team. So you can start to see how we need this reflexive practice in our teaching, in our students, to be able to respond and fully engage in an education approach such as that. Oh no, sorry. Okay, we're back. So this is an example from a school that I was recently a part of called Creativity and Complexity. And it's one of our second year subjects in the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. And this school is the introduction into the world of complexity and systems thinking, and it's a lot for students to wrap their heads around. And this year we posed the challenge to students of tackling climate change in Australia. The subject was run during the bushfires, so it was incredibly prevalent and real for these students, with many having to deal with that whilst learning at the same time. And the incredible coordinators of this subject framed this exploration through the 4 lenses of the elements. So we had earth, wind, water, fire, which we split off into these different collaborative teams and groups to focus on. But at the core of this, we wanted students to be able to explore complexity through the body and recognise themselves as complex beings and as part of complex systems. So the funny photo with the funny faces is part of a session I ran where we were exploring embodied complexity and really just starting to settle into our body and recognising that as a source of knowledge and learning. And then having a play around with some tableaus where we would build collaboratively and generatively a tableau around a particular climate scene, explore the different interventions that could take place in that as a way of starting to understand those complex systems and the role that intermittent and regular interventions play in shaping and changing those systems. And this culminated in the delivery of the students' first assessment, where they had to design and present a experiential activity that their peers and teachers could take part in. And the idea was that this activity should help others understand the space and challenge that they were looking at, but also understand the complexity of the system that that challenge was within. So what you can see before you is a group of students who reimagined the game of Twister, and they had one student as Earth in the middle of this Twister game, crouched down, and slowly through different prompts, they had different stakeholders, different actions take part in this Twister game. And over the course of 10 minutes, physical pressure was put on Earth at the centre of this Twister game. And so we could then come away from that and reflect and understand what this particular system and challenge they were looking at was. So we often talk in this space about the fact that we as teachers and facilitators should have just as much fun as the students. And trust me, taking part in this Twister game and watching it unfold a second time was incredibly fun. So these are just some of, I guess, the words that come to mind for me when I think about learning experiences such as the ones we've talked about today. And I see, as a past student of this particular degree in a transdisciplinary space and now a teacher in this space, students who come through who already possess a lot of these qualities, and they by no means breeze through tertiary education. They have their own challenges, but what's most incredible is that we see lots of students that would not possess many of these qualities, and they come into a degree where their perspective, their views, their understanding, their way of knowing, their way of learning is valued. It doesn't have to fit a particular mold, a particular set of criteria. It's fostered, and they come out as incredible individuals. And what's really exciting about this skill set is that we talk a lot about preparing students for the future of work and the future of our world, but rather these students are actually able to shape and create what that future will be. So these are just some of the qualities that we work towards, and I guess skill sets that we aim for our students to leave a degree such as BCII with. But what's really exciting about this transdisciplinary approach is that it's not just the students that leave with these skill sets or possess them. It is our teachers, it is our industry partners, community partners, because we get to engage in these learning experiences together. So that's a really brief and quick overview of this transdisciplinary learning space. I'm sure all of us could talk for hours about the ins and outs of it, but I hope that gives you a bit of insight into what some different and good learning approaches might look like in the tertiary space.
Thanks so much, Lucy. That was brilliant. And I think we all turned up tonight not knowing that we were actually going to a dinner party. And I'm so sorry you brought up the pavlova, because I think we're going to have to explain that to some of our overseas guests. It's not a ballerina at all, although she had something to do with it. I think there was a lovely comment that came up in the chat. My kids were transfixed with your drawings. That was just gorgeous. And I think the Montessori in you was coming out there, Lucy. We're on right on time at the moment, but if people are willing to stick around for another 5 minutes, we'll try to facilitate a few questions. There are a few that are coming through, and people who have to go, feel free to go, but we'll have a few quick questions. And I thought I might start a question actually working off the last slide that Stephanie raised, which was all about their response to COVID and some of the actions that Lindfield had taken. If I could throw that scenario to Lucy first and then to Bill, what do you think are the impacts of COVID in terms of how it shifted our thinking in education, and particularly from a long term? I'm not so concerned about, just how we had to do things for a few weeks. Has it shifted things in the long term in your mind? And first to you, Lucy, and then to Bill.
Absolutely, and we've seen this internally within our faculty and university, but also in the broader education sphere. I think internally it's brought to light many of the qualities I think we hoped we possessed, such as being flexible, adaptive and reflective. We've had an interesting experience, I guess, in having quite firm boundaries, in the sense that we didn't have the time and space to design perfectly, plan perfectly the delivery of a lot of our subjects and learning experiences. But being forced into those confines have meant that we've had to be incredibly adaptive, and that we've had to build off what already existed in new ways. So I've seen a lot emerge in the way that we've approached our teaching that would not have emerged without those confines and boundaries. And to speak to what Steph was talking about before as well, turning a crisis into an opportunity, I think we've had no choice but to view it as an opportunity, and we've definitely seen this as an opportunity to pursue a lot of the things that were down the track for us, such as more widespread transdisciplinary education within UTS. But we've also had the opportunity to guide, help and upskill primary and secondary teachers and education leaders outside of the university, because they've seen this same opportunity, wanted to jump on it, but perhaps not quite known how. So that's been really exciting to have worked with other educators outside of our uni to do that.
Certainly seizing the opportunity. Bill, what are your comments?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Lucy said. I'll just add a few things so not to repeat what she had already brought up. But I think that you mentioned in the introduction that I was always interested in education reform. And I think that what this has done is we have seen a problem that has affected the entire planet. It's been a global phenomenon and something that we are all having to face. How does it affect me personally? How does it affect my life? How is it affecting the world? So in terms of how, I think that educationalists around the world are also all of a sudden realizing that, perhaps we have to look at life differently. There's really some really fundamental aspects of the way that we see teaching and learning that I think came out from when people were forced to do online learning, which I think has a lot of merit. And all of a sudden it just made people think, well, how can we do this? In particular, we saw such a beautiful connection between the home and the school form through this process, where all of a sudden, our teachers were into the homes, on the screen, but into the homes, and they saw what was happening in their homes, and all the good and the bad things. But it was one of those things that was very accepting environment. So I think that the aspect of education that is not only a global part of who we are, and also to recognize that education has to be very global in its scope. The fact that the education link between the home and the school is something also that I think the COVID experience has given us much more of an awareness of how the parent can be a part of the child's learning. A lot of parents were overwhelmed by it. I know, not just in Montessori, but around the world, there was a lot of comment about, oh my gosh, what do I do? And it's not so much about what do you do or what we do. It's about understanding your child and getting to know your child as a learner, not just as a child that you have to kind of get ready, because, believe that the child is self-constructing in these years, from birth to adulthood. And if they're going to self-construct, they need to be given that opportunity, and parents are part of that, more so, I think, than the schools. And so I think it has really brought that to the forefront. And one last thing for Montessori that doesn't use a lot of technology, this has been a huge, huge thing. Our teachers were not used to having computers. A lot of our parents don't have screens at home. And so I think we saw that it is a tool that we have that is available to us, and has a lot of merit. And I think in people who are very traditional, the way they look at things and are anti-screen, have seen that, okay, well, this is a necessity. Look at, we're having this wonderful meeting. We're able to do that, with over 100 people because of technology. So there's a great learning that's happened for the Montessori community, especially.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And Stephanie, I'd normally give you a right of reply, but in terms of time, what I'll do for you instead is throw one of the Q&As to you. Simon Kelly has asked, what's the role of learning spaces in this bricolage of learning? And I thought that was a good one for you because you've just moved into some brand new spaces. What do you think is the role of learning spaces in that bricolage of learning?
Yeah, I think that's a really great term. Thanks, Lucy. I love it. And I love the way that you sort of described that transition from the multidisciplinary environment through to transdisciplinary. And we are very conscious of that continuum. And I think in terms of the learning spaces, we've learnt so much, I think, in the last, as I said, 12 months in inhabiting the spaces. And there are so many complex aspects to our particular setup at Lindfield, including the fact that we began our time very restricted in the spaces we could occupy due to limitations placed on us by the Rural Fire Service. So we've literally got a 2-hour rated firewall running through the middle of our building, sort of containing us in what are probably the worst learning spaces in the entire 6-level building. So we've had to really adapt and think and take on that challenge, because the other thing that we do is everything is co-taught. There's not one teacher in a cell-like classroom with a group of students at any time. And the spaces really are important to enable that. We understand the importance of acoustics, particularly for students who have sensitivity to sensory and auditory elements. And so we've had to, and for us, all of our spaces were designed around cave, campfire, waterhole learning, the aspects that Dr. David Thornberg has shared back in the 70s and has since developed into a more digital era as well. So for us, it's about within a larger space, thinking about how we use furniture as one particular element and the flexibility of that furniture, which is critical to create different spaces and to offer opportunities for students to learn in the way that they feel comfortable. Quite often, I'll walk into learning spaces and they're on the windowsill or on the floor or, sitting perched on the edge of something. So children choose to learn in different ways depending on how they're comfortable. And I think it's about accommodating that through the way we use space.
I was on mute, beg your pardon for that, but I was just going to suggest it's also the students joining in to the chorus of House of the Rising Sun on the grand piano with your two assistant There are a number of other questions, and in deference to the time, we're well over time. What I will do is call the meeting to a close. I'd like to just finish up by saying, firstly, thanks sincerely to our three speakers, Bill, Stephanie, and Lucy, for your time and particularly for your intelligence and you know, a really thought-provoking, stimulating, and provocative session. It's been sensational. Can I say to everybody that this session is being recorded and a link can be sent to you. So there was a lot to take on there, but everybody, every speaker has kindly agreed to be recorded and to distribute that information. Thanks also to the Hayball Gleam team, and I'll mention them: Fiona Young, Andy Fong, Anna Ewald-Rice, and Mitch Harris, who has made the technology work. And lastly to Mika, who has really done us proud with a wonderful welcome to country. Thank you all for attending from far and wide. And finally, if I could say, look out for our next session, which is on the 16th of July, and that includes Dr. Julia Atkin and Howard Smith on the subject of joint use developments. So again, that wraps up our evening. Once again, thank you for attending. Good night to you all, and do stay safe. Good night.